The most exciting single document I have found here is probably the Friedman's copy of the book The American Black Chamber by Herbert O. Yardley.
This is one of my favorite things in the Friedman collection. The American Black Chamber came about, sort of grew out of our experience in World War I. Herbert O. Yardley, who had been commissioned during the war and ran what was called MI8 in wartime, and then was a successful cryptologist in France during the peace treaty work at Versailles, came home, and he liked the work and he was interested. He had a lot of supporters in the military. The State Department funded this organization, which was known variously as MI8 and the Black Chamber.
America, after the war, some people realized that we need to be reading traffic, whether of enemies or sometimes even of allies, to find out what was happening overseas. Some other people disagreed with this and said that gentlemen shouldn't be reading each other's mails. Secretary Simpson coming up with that lovely quote. The Black Chamber had acted as this place where decoded diplomatic correspondence could be worked on.
And it was a good concern. Everybody was happy, State Department was happy, and then the new Secretary of State, Henry Stimson, in 1929, and he does admit to having said something of this sort, the famous quote, "Gentlemen do not read other gentlemen's mail," and this is late 1929 at about the time the stock market is crashing. Whether this was a moral decision or an economic decision is still, unclear. But Yardley's concern is put out of business. And of course, this compels Yardley to find other ways to make money to support himself, his wife, his children, and his mistress. And he will go on then to make money by writing the book, The American Black Chamber.
Yardley in 1931 publishes this tell-all account of the work of his agency, which was shut down in 1929, the so-called Black Chamber. Friedman, as the more or less successful competitor who carries on doing that work, is asked to comment on this book, which says so much about the secret world of code breaking and actually says quite a lot about current practice. He was asked regularly in public and in governmental circles to comment on it and resolutely refused. He was silent on many subjects, and this was one of them in public. So Friedman seems to have decided just to take a no-comment line as far as Yardley goes. Well, everywhere except the margins of his own copy of that one book. That copy that Yardley himself gave to Friedman, it has Yardley's gift plate to Friedman, is in the library here. Not only did Friedman go through it and write his own critical commentary in the margins, but he went to the trouble of finding the 4 or 5 other people who were involved and who were still around and who could be consulted. And he had them write their critical commentary in the margins too.
He has enlisted the help of Parker Hitt and Frank Moorman and anybody else who's had anything to do with cryptology. And he's written letters to them, say, what do you think of this? And he wrote to Hitt saying, well, they've stolen your work. He's stolen your work here for this article. And he collected them, and then he annotated the book with their comments to just rebut point by point Yardley's work. And it seemed a personal point of pride that, that the record had to be set straight. I think that's one of the great, people are very interested in hearing about that annotated book. And the folks who study cryptologic history and employees at NSA are always wondering, what did Friedman think of Yardley? And they're fascinated by Friedman's comments in the book.
I think Yardley and Friedman were so different from each other that there was just a deep kind of personality clash. And so you see that playing out in the marginal notes. Some of them are simply, no, this happened on this date rather than that date. No, it was this person who developed this theory, not you, not someone else. So there is a setting of the record straight, but there's also a sarcasm and a kind of taking him down a notch. A lot of exclamation points. You know, there's something in the tone in a lot of these notes that is more personal. Speaks to a more personal conflict and not just an attempt to set the record straight.
Yardley and Friedman couldn't be more different. If you read the biography of Yardley by David Kahn, I think he tries to clean up the picture as much as you can. From Friedman's point of view, Yardley was a drunk, a womanizer. He didn't dress well. He was sloppy. He bragged about himself. He gambled. I mean, name a vice, and Yardley was seriously guilty of it. On the other hand, Friedman was very buttoned down, very abstemious, very correct in his manners, and you could see where it would be very hard to put these two men in a room together and tell them to work on it.
But I can't remember seeing such a revealing set of marginal annotations or one where a community effort has produced such a systematic attempt to set the record straight.
And I believe he was appalled when he found out, when Yardley wrote his book and what he disclosed, because it sort of violated Friedman's principles of what should be protected. You've got to take it with a grain of salt to begin with, and to read it first on your own, and then to read Friedman's annotations and say, well, you know, realistically, you know, it'd be great to compare what is the real truth about what Yardley wrote. It's probably somewhere in between what Yardley wrote and what Friedman claims, although Friedman does a lot of backing up with actual facts and documentation, which details, sometimes fancifully and not necessarily accurately, how he got into the code making and code breaking business as a State Department clerk, what he did during the war. It slurs some of the work of the AEF in code making and code breaking during the war. And then he details some of the things the Black Chamber did. And of course, this made the book a very big bestseller in foreign parts, especially its Japanese translation sold very well. And you can imagine that the Japanese found out that their communications were being read. They moved on to make more difficult things, and the fur really starts flying after the publication of the book, and Friedman's appalled. They're really two very distinct personalities when you think about it. Yardley is easygoing and jovial and, you know, likes partying and socializing, and Friedman liked socializing and party too, but he's more reserved and gentlemanly. And, you know, Friedman, I think, you know, think of proper when you think of Friedman, and you think of, you know, very improper when you think of Yardley, and sort of like oil and water. And, you know, I think Friedman probably respected Yardley's work from the beginning, but then turned against him because he felt Yardley lied in his book and he exposed secrets. And he didn't want to have anything to do with that.